Greetings, viewers, and welcome to another episode of Roll Off a Tangent. I'm Robert Gibson, alias Zendexor, and my fellow critics on this four-power summit are Nikita Zuev, XJ, and Anthony Simeo. Today's discussion will focus on a tale by Robert E. Howard, most celebrated as the author of the Conan series, but creator of many other memorable works, including those which feature the enigmatic hero Solomon Kane, a Puritan adventurer who hails from early modern England in the Elizabethan stroke Jacobean era. I'll leave the character analysis to my colleagues and will merely point out here that although it has been said that Howard's protagonists are all cut from the same cloth, Kane is markedly different from Conan and even from Kull, though sometimes he shares Kull's brooding uncertainty. And in the story we'll be looking at, Kane has moments when he seems to doubt whether he's doing the right thing, not a thought that ever bothers Conan. The story is Skulls in the Stars, which appeared in the January 1929 issue of Weird Tales. In my view, this is the best of the Kane stories, and it is a miracle of sheer narrative skill. It's very short, just 12 pages, but without any strain, it smoothly meshes action and background with a thought-provoking theme, without at any stage paying the price of seeming too densely packed or over-contrived. The key idea, spoiler alert, you had better have read the story before listening any further, is that the ghost of a murdered lunatic may itself be a kind of lunatic, a demon of vengefulness which cannot identify its target, and so destroys everyone it meets, which it can do by trespassing sufficiently into the material mode to inflict physical harm. Solomon Kane survives and prevails in his encounter with this nightmarish thing because his sheer courage enables him to trespass in the reverse direction. That's to say, the spiritual force of his valour enables him to reach across the boundary between natural and supernatural in order to overcome his foe. Kane thus defeats the ghost. And here the plot requires that he learn from the defeated ghost the truth of who murdered him in life. A lesser writer than Howard might have made a hash of this by means of some ill-fitting contrivance that would be open to all sorts of objections. Howard accomplishes it perfectly. It remains for me to add that the two other main ingredients of the story are equally effective. One is the opening scene, just 2 pages long, in which Kane first learns of the atrocities and an attempt is made to warn him off from going across the moor. Those 2 pages perfectly introduce Kane himself as a somewhat ambiguous character and simultaneously build up an aura of menace and mystery. The other is the last scene, in which old Ezra the miser, whose murder of his insane cousin started all the trouble, is staked out to his terrible fate. Right, who wants to take up the baton?
Maybe Nikki, you
Robert.
wanna go first?
I mean, I am the resident Robert E. Howard enthusiast.
Exactly.
And after all,
I have my own
what can?
thoughts. I have my own thoughts on the story, but I really would want to hear from you first.
Okay, fair enough. Well, you have to really look at this story and place it in when it was written. So this is the second tale of Solomon Kane. So whoever is reading it presumably has read the previous magazine of Weird Tales and is continuing on seeing Solomon Kane do his thing. Even though that's the case, however, I don't think the story fails to really introduce you to Kane as much as a 7 A4 page story can. In fact, I would even say that the introduction that we do get is precise and concise, which is anything you'd want from a character introduction. when it comes to the actual adventure, it also has, a big, a big start and a big finish, right? Don't go there. You're gonna have a big problem on your hands. Whatever. I'm the main character of the story. I'm going, right? And then you get what you came for. You get the fight, and then you get the resolution. And I think the resolution is actually much more engaging than the first part of the story. Say for maybe the preamble right before you see the creature, the laughing and the ferns, the screams that echo throughout. That's very atmospheric. It builds it. When it comes to the fight itself, I wasn't as impressed. But the fact that Solomon Kane um, sentences this guy to a horrible fate, and all the townspeople are there to witness this frontier justice, just how gruesome it all is. It's very uncanny. Because a lot of the times when you read Robert E. Howard's work, a lot of the times the way justice is dispensed or someone gets their comeuppance is more or less within the constraints of, when this was written. And although there are those elements within the story where he's like, oh yeah, the injuries were, unthinkable, unimaginable, right, and so on and so forth, because he just simply can't describe some of the horrible details due to censorship. Um, the idea that the protagonist of your story sentences a man to die to a ghost slowly being killed, like you saw someone else being killed in, at the very beginning of the tale. It's very different, and because of that, it was very enjoyable for me. As far as as the length of the tale is concerned, I would also say that for the amount of words within it, it captures the atmosphere perfectly. It serves you exactly what it says on the tin. I guess my only problem is there's no reason why it should be called The Skulls and the Stars. I don't know why it's called The Skulls and the Stars. The Skulls and the Stars are mentioned 2 or 3 times, but that does not save the story from being, from being called falsely. I think those parts could have been taken out, and anything else, any other gibberish could be put in those places. Um, and I think it should have a different name, really. I think Skulls and the Stars is such a cool title that it being used for this tale kind of robs it of, the fantastical power that such a, swirl of words contains. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. I mean, did you really think anything else would come out of my mouth regarding a Robert E. Howard story? It's like you've never watched this show before. All right, that's me for now.
Anthony, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. This is. I wish we had more of the Solomon Kane stories. I don't think there was many of them written, but the character always intrigued me just with sort of the juxtaposition. He's supposed to be sort of like a swashbuckler. You get hints of his history. He's kind of hard bitten, seen a lot of supernatural and man-made violence. And kind of seems world weary, and he's kind of clinging to his faith. So it would be better that he's not just a pirate or a. So I think he's not just a reaver, a slayer, like Conan is. He's not just some guy who fights and kills and goes out carousing and spends his money, on wine and women, frivolously. So in that, he gets that depth of character that Conan never really had a lot of the time, or most of the time, in my opinion. It's interesting though that you're thinking of, just like Nikki said, you're thinking that you have to put it in the context of when the story was written. So yeah, I guess in these magazines, these pulp magazines, they sort of had to take for granted that you might be reading a story about these characters for the first time. So you had to have that little bit of introduction. So that you had to be very skillful, like Howard was undoubtedly, to balance that. You have to kind of quickly reintroduce the characters, sort of. It's a serial story, in a serial magazine. So you have to reintroduce that, but in the hands of a lesser writer like Robert had said, that could fall flat, make things kind of fall flat, and make the story seem bloated. It's interesting because I kind of find myself when I read these stories from back in the day, from the early 20th century, I wish we could write things as pulpily and as info dumpy, for lack of a better term, as they did, because they kind of get into that description and sort of like a lot of kind of info dump in some points. But again, he's a masterful writer, so he balances that with still keeping the pace up and the action going. So
Wait, wait,
it's
wait, wait,
interesting
wait.
because
Anthony, let me
yeah.
guess. Are you a Brandon Sanderson fan?
Uh, Actually, it depends. It depends. We can get back to that. It depends. Some of his stuff I think is terrible, and some of it I think is great. Like I love the Mistborn. The first three Mistborn books
Yeah.
I thought were excellent. Tangent. I think the Mistborn books were good. I couldn't stand Elantris. So I feel like he's too workmanlike in his writing a lot of the time. But why would you say that in terms of what I'm saying?
Because Brandon Sanderson is the most info dumpy author I have ever came across. Reading Brandon Sanderson is
Yeah.
like reading the player's handbook.
Yeah, I really don't. I really don't like the info dump. It is a lazy way of writing. It's kind of a cheap and dirty, quick and dirty way to kind of get the story out. It's easier to tell and not show, right? Everybody says show, don't tell, and I feel like back in the day, it seems like writers were given more leeway to tell and info dump rather than show because they had that short time to kind of get things out. So I guess that's why it's like, that doesn't fly anymore. Everybody's too artsy now. You can't info dump anymore. But I really don't like Brandon Sanderson's work for the most part, but we can get back to that. We'll have to read a Sanderson story someday.
Oh,
But hey,
yeah, let's get back to Solomon Kane.
but anyway, tangent. But anyway, his descriptions in terms of like, when you're saying, oh, he was lithe as a panther, that's recycled, sort of, simile descriptions and comparing protagonists to animal traits, specifically like cats, big cats. That's kind of a Howard thing. That's kind of like, okay, he stalked like a panther. He was like a stalking panther. I'm like, okay, I can deal with less of that, but that's just a nitpick. In terms of the skulls with the stars, though, I have to disagree. I feel like the skull and the stars. First, the moon is described as a skull in the stars earlier in the story, and I feel like that tips your hand to like the world that he inhabits. The world that Solomon Kane inhabits is this bleak place where even the moon, where so many poems have been written about the moon, and the moon is a treasured thing in our mythologies most of the time. But to compare the moon to a skull in the stars, kind of just blankly staring down a symbol of death. It's kind of flips the whole general idea of how we see the moon as something that's poetic and lovely and beautiful in the night sky. And then, to hear the miser at the end screaming, the skulls and the stars, the skulls and the stars, like he's kind of echoing that emptiness and the uncaring universe. If all the lights in the skies are just skulls in the stars, or just skulls staring down at us from the gulf above us, that's pretty bleak. And I think that's kind of why maybe they kept that in, and why it's cryptic, but I feel like you can interpret it that way, is that the skulls and the stars are just the cosmic horror sort of aspect, like the universe doesn't care, and all that is above us is not wonderful twinkling lights, but just skulls in the stars. So I feel like I really like got into that title as the more I thought about it. So at first it doesn't make sense, but if you kind of interpret it that way. But all in all, I think it's a cool character. I wish there was more of stories of him. There was a role playing game that was put out based in that world that I played in a few sessions of back in the day, and I thought it was really, yeah, I think it was Savage Worlds.
Correct. The Savage World system was used.
Yeah,
I mean,
and it was great.
Two things, Anthony.
Yeah.
Number one,
Yeah.
the story you have described where the emptiness of space is compared to the stars and the skull, mirroring the moon. That's beautiful, and you should write it. But that's not the story. I think the meaning that you created from it is fantastical, right? Like from just pieces of the words peppered around the story. But I mean, I think in order to earn that, what you just described, in my opinion, the story needed to do a lot more with the
Mm.
concept of the skulls and the stars, right? I mean,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
when,
I guess
yeah,
that's the beauty of literature, right? That's the beauty of story and literature is that, two different people can read something and take it away. So maybe I would concede that maybe Howard leaned too hard, or his editor maybe leaned a little too hard into it. And like you said, if you want to be, oh, it's just a cool sounding title. We'll call it The Skulls and the Stars, and makes me wonder what the editorial process was for this story. I'm sure the editors are
mm,
picking the titles, and they're going, oh, you had this line in there, and I don't know what it meant, but it sounds neat. But I'll concede a little bit. Maybe I was doing a little work for Howard there, but that's the kind of way. But he did write in the tradition of, he was sort of a pen pal of H.P. Lovecraft, right? So
mm.
it's like that cosmic horror thing creeps into his work too, even in Conan and etc. So I'm kind of sticking to my theory there. But that's it
Secondly,
for me for now.
yeah,
Good.
secondly, there are 8 stories that feature Solomon Kane
Mhm.
by Robert E. Howard, and to be fair, that is a lot more than than Kull gets. Kull gets 2 official stories he's in. That's
Mhm.
2 that we reviewed, and then there's the third one which was remade into a Conan story, which is the worst Conan story ever made. So it should have
Mhm.
remained with Kull. And um, there's a, if I remember correctly, hold on, I'll actually look it up. Yeah, there's a story that is about Solomon Kane, and the name of the story is The Moon of Skulls.
Mhm.
And just like this story, I don't understand why it's called like that. Like the plot has nothing to do with the moon. So I don't know. Maybe he just loved the concept of the moon being a skull.
So wait, those are two separate stories. I actually
Correct,
thought
yeah.
it was the same.
No, no.
Okay.
Much longer. The moon.
Yeah,
It's
maybe
much
he just
longer?
loves
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
death motif,
Yeah,
But
okay.
that's it for me for now. I wanted to hear, pass it off to XJ for your
Yeah.
thoughts, and then we can.
I think I want to pick my words carefully with this. So first of all, I I actually like Solomon Kane far more than Kull and Conan. I'm gonna have to say
Mm.
Oh.
he is. So one of the things that does put me off Robert E. Howard is that he writes a team. Like Conan is a team. He manages to dress Conan up into a character that has depth and all that, but essentially Conan is a team. He is the wild man caught between civilization and barbarism, and Robert E. Howard is not shy about telling us that over and over again. Especially in the Pool of the Black Ones, he kept saying it. It's like reading a Conan story. At some point, the reader will come across something to that effect about the savageness of Conan, the pure savageness of Conan versus the decadence of civilization and all that. And I like Solomon Kane a lot more because he feels way more grounded. I don't know quite what the right word to describe him is. He feels a lot more real, less of a team. But this is also the first and only Solomon Kane story I've read. He in further tales of Solomon Kane that we cover, the thematic nature of Robert E. Howard comes up again. Then I'm gonna have to withdraw my words because I can totally see Solomon Kane also as a team, like the fanatic knight errant that wanders the countryside, you know, And if in further stories he keeps repeating, Robert E. Howard keeps repeating that, I'm gonna have to take this point away. But aside from that, what I find is this character has a lot more things going on inside than Conan does. He is like you said, Anthony. He is a very he's a man in turmoil. He is a very something is really driving him on, and he is a monster in his own right, but he denies that. And he would be I think he would be very shocked, because I think there was one passage in the story where Robert E. Howard was describing Solomon Kane as the fire in his blood is because he wants the danger, he wants the adventure and all that. But if somebody suggested that to him, he would be in shock denial. I do believe that was in the middle section of the story. So I think Solomon Kane is a much more interesting character. There's much more conflict within him, and that means there's also going to be a lot of conflict without as well. I also really like the way this story is written is a lot more. I would describe it as pulpy and fast paced, and it's definitely meant for a more a less literary audience. I think it's the way it's written is more to the point. It's very short. It's not short. It gets to the point really quickly, and it's very different from some Conan stories, I would say. Yeah. The plot of the story itself is I would say it's competently managed. It's not anything groundbreaking, but it's also done with a skillfulness that separates a lot of let me think. You can have a trope, but if the author is not skilled, the trope will still come across as flat. But that's not the case here. Robert E. Howard obviously knows how to tell a story, and this story is competently told. Yeah, all in all, I like the story. I really like Solomon Kane as a character much more than I like Conan. Much more than I like Kull. I'm gonna have to say. Yeah. Over to you, Robert.
I'd like to add something which I don't know if you people have what you think of the actual horror of this horror tale, but I think it's a case where Howard unusually manages to write something really scary, not just performatively scary, but really scary. I think that the idea of Kane going forward, which is the opposite of what Conan would do, Conan would avoid the supernatural. Kane deliberately challenges this nightmare, and I've often wondered myself what I would do, because I've been plagued with nightmares every so often in my life. I've had nightmares, and at the beginning of the nightmare, there's a point where you know what's going to happen. You know that something unspeakable is going to happen if you don't wake up, but you're given the choice, or I'm given the choice, and I choose to shake myself out of it and wake up. But it has occurred to me as an intellectual, out of curiosity, what would happen if instead of doing that, I challenged it? Because I know it's not real, at least, I presume and I hope it's not real. So if I challenged it, what would happen? And I'll never be brave enough to challenge it, but if I did, what would happen? And Kane's policy of going straight into it is fascinating to me. I really, really think that it's a great theme for a story. And I think it's very much unlike what Howard usually manages in his stories. Incidentally, just as an aside, Anthony mentioned the moon, as a skull, and he also mentioned that Howard and Lovecraft knew each other. Well, Lovecraft has a good line in The Shadow Out of Time, a bloated fungoid moon. It's an example of Lovecraft getting away with really outrageous use of the English language. How can the moon be fungoid? But anyway, he does get away with it, and but that's by the way. The point I'm trying to make is that Howard has a very interesting idea here. Could anybody, are there any heroes if you're confronted by a pure nightmare? He would seem to suggest that there are, or that there could be.
Yeah, I guess he persists. Solomon Kane persists because he has that Puritan duty. He has that background, so he has that
No, I think it's
one
because he's
side
a
of
thrill
him.
seeker. It literally,
Well,
like
that
he's standing there
yeah,
and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna do this for Lord." And then literally Howard's like, "But he wasn't doing it for the Lord. It's because he loves adrenaline rushes."
right, exactly. But there is that tension in him. Yeah, maybe he has a bit of a pirate and a swashbuckler and a rogue in him, but he also has that internal conflict, like XJ was saying, makes him a little more complex than
Mm.
sort of Conan just barreling through sword first into everything and never doubts himself. And it's he's fighting it, but he gives into it. He does love that darker part of himself, the non-Puritan part. But he revels in it, but he still has conflict at the end of the day, from his religious side, however much he still holds on to his Puritan faith. So it's is it, but that makes, is he just lying about how Puritan he is and how faithful he is and just an excuse to himself and others? I don't know. But that questioning just makes it interesting. So yeah, that's a cool part of him. And then as far as the fungoid moon, if the moon's made of cheese, it can get moldy, right? So there you go. There you go, Robert. Moldy moon,
Okay,
fungoid moon.
there's a thread I want to pick out from what Robert said, but not the moon. Not about the moon. And that is the horror aspect of the sequence between Solomon Kane and the monster, and I actually thought that was not that great. I'm gonna take a contrarian stance and say it's not that great. So first of all, it kind of depends on the world building at the end of the day. But I've thought the way Solomon Kane found his ability to overcome the ghost to be a bit of a cop out. It's like, can't you do anything better than just some unknown thing flowing into Solomon Kane and then giving him the strength to overcome? But that really depends on the world building, because if it gets fleshed out that there is that the world that Solomon Kane inhabits is driven by will and determination, and that is the theme of Solomon Kane, then that's a different thing. But this story though is like feels like Mr. Howard, you don't really know how to extricate your character from this situation, so you just kind of pull that out of your sleeve. I was going to use
Yeah.
another word, but yeah, that if I have to say there's any thing that would pull the story down for me, it would be that. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe he could have said like, "Oh, this holy trinket he found allowed him to grab on or attack its non-corporeal form. Maybe there was some trinket or something like that could have materialized it, right, on his other adventures. Because we hit into the story in media res, right? We're dumped into this story where this kid's chasing down an adventurer we don't know. And so he's in the middle of it. So we don't know anything about his history. He could have picked up a relic or something in the Holy Land on his journeys there and they could have made more of his religious background of like, oh, I picked up this relic that makes ghosts solid so I can slash them with my sword. I don't know. Yeah, I
I gotta
agree
say,
that.
I disagree with both of you. I love the idea that a man can be so angry that he can literally grab ghosts. You know,
And
I
it at the end of the day, like I said, it depends on the world building, because like if like I said, strong emotions and very strong will actually have material impact on the world, and that gets fleshed out in the stories that follow, then that's a different thing, and that's a pretty nice thing to explore as well. It's just that in this particular situation though, it's just like feels a little bit cheap. Yeah. But
No,
yeah.
it's not cheap. I think it's just that in a short story, a very short story like this, it's one of the major themes, perhaps the major theme of the story. So it's certainly not something tacked on. And besides the influence of the will on material reality and on bringing ghostly reality into the material, it's even if you don't believe in ghosts or any, if you don't have any religious beliefs, you still have to face up to the mind body problem, so called by philosophers. Our minds do have control. We can tell ourselves to lift an arm, and lo and behold, the arm gets lifted. There's no there's no easy solution as to how on earth that can happen, apart from the idea that the immaterial will affects material reality.
So I think
And
you misunderstand me, Robert. And it's not that I have an issue. I think the idea of the will having a very very strong impact on the world is cheap. I think that can be very powerful in a very powerful theme to explore. What I feel was cheap is that there's no lead up in this particular short story, and then there's nothing before the confrontation with the ghost that suggests that this is anything like that. And then when he confronted the ghost and he had no other weapons to fight the ghost or whatever, no way to grapple with or deal with the ghost, and then the way he overcomes the ghost is some mysterious will that comes in, flows through him, and then he overcomes it. Not that I felt was cheap. It's not that the thing itself. It is that Howard dumped that solution, gave Kane that solution to get out of his the problem that Howard wrote him into. That is the thing that's cheap, not
yeah,
the idea
you
itself.
see, if Kane hadn't been special, he wouldn't have been there in the first place. That's the point, I think.
This
And
reminds
I
me
think
of
again,
a story we reviewed, which was written 6 years before the Skull and the Stars, and that's The Conquering Will. The Conquering Will, if some of you haven't read it or haven't seen the episode, is about a man who goes on a trail to do a job, and then everything goes wrong, and although he is a strong individual, he dies, and then his ghost doesn't leave. And he's just so angry at the world and so despaired that this could be happening. He wants to see his loved ones one last time, and he goes and he steals a man's body. He steals a man's body who recently passed, becomes alive again and lives this false life, right? It seems to be that this kind of theme of will being able to conquer one's enemies or one's shortcomings is like it's a big thing in literature at the time. But I think here, at least the way I interpreted it, was that because Solomon Kane is a Puritan, God saved them. And the way God saved them is he basically manifested the will and the anger of the Puritan into a weapon, right? Now the text doesn't say it, and that's the where I agree with XJ. There could be, like he literally the way you could change this, like through the divine intervention of the Lord Himself, Solomon Kane's hands could wrung the neck of the creature or something like that. Whatever.
I mean, it doesn't even have to be something that visual, so to speak. It could just be he could have just started Solomon Kane as just being like so strong in his Puritan faith that it drives him, to do crazy things, and there could be a reputation that swirls around Solomon Kane that is him, you know,
Hmm.
stuff like that. It
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like so that's why I said it kind of depends on how this theme is developed in other Solomon Kane stories. Like if this is a recurring thing, then yes, that is part of the world building, and then that is a very powerful tool, not tool, but an idea to explore, like how strong faith, how a man's faith, the depth and the strength of it, could influence the world. Now that I think that would be a rather cool thing to explore. Yeah, it's just that in this particular context, it's introduced without any lead up to it, and so it comes across as I don't have any way for Solomon Kane to fight this incorporeal ghost, so I'm just gonna use this to get myself out of this situation. That kind of feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess you have to also consider that these stories were, and again, trying to think meta about things, the stories are kind of all of his stories, heroic fantasy, sword and sorcery, they're all about sort of power, wish fulfillment, power fantasies for like, adolescent boys, right? So give or take, I'm sure other people of different demographics appreciated the stories, but it was like Nikki said, it was a time of when people believed in like the sheer will can overcome anything, and it's pre World War II, kind of America. So and Howard was a big one for that. Just that a man and his will can overcome anything. So it was this wish fulfillment power fantasy sort of thing where it's like yeah. So just of course he would just pull it out of thin air. Like, well, I'm surprised he didn't just say like just his sheer manliness, allowed Solomon Kane to, grab ghost stuff, incorporeal
How do
ghost.
you fight a ghost? Be a man.
Right, that's it. Just
Yeah,
through
another
sheer
another hair
manliness and
pull,
just grab it,
grew on his chest.
grab that ghost. So it was just like, yeah, how are you going to get yourself out? Well, hey, just be a real man and just grab that ghost and, kill him. So I
I
don't
just
know.
imagine
It is.
you're talking to your grandfather as he's like, walking around the village, like, oh, like that. You just see a werewolf run by, and you're scared to death, and your grandfather's like, we used to fight them with sticks.
Right. We used
Now
yeah,
people use silver bullets.
yeah, right. Yeah. So it's interesting the kind of again just you have to place it in its time and place when it was written and the audience too. So yeah, interesting.
So I'm trying to think of what sort of influence that Solomon Kane might have had in as a legacy. I remember a movie called Solomon Kane. I remember
Yep.
watching it, and I remember being mildly entertained by it. It was a pleasant
Mm-hmm.
afternoon way to spend an afternoon, but I don't remember a single thing about it other than that.
There
Yeah,
was
I
a
saw
lot
it
of
too.
Marvel comics with Solomon Kane. He appeared in what's it called? A bunch of crossovers too. There was this French line of stories, can't remember written by who, where basically a lot of like those medieval late 16th, 17th century characters were all in the same universe, and Kane appears in them. That's sort of like your precursor to League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. If any of you have heard of that. Robert, League of
Sean
Extraordinary Gentlemen
Connery
is
was
a
in a movie.
the movie sucked.
I don't know.
But Sean
I
Connery was in it.
just like you like anything by Robert E. Howard, I would like any movie with Sean Connery in it.
I see. Well, he does play Ernest Hemingway, right, or something like that.
Well,
No.
yeah. Well, no. Are you talking
What does
about
he play?
Are you? He played Alan Quatermain. I think you're
Quartermain.
talking about the
Quatermain, yeah,
yeah.
Quatermain. That's right.
Ernest Hemingway.
Yeah, I mean, he basically looks like Ernest Hemingway in that movie. That's the way I remember it. Anyway, so The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is a comic series made by Alan Moore, the man who basically made the only literary work within the comic industry called The Watchmen. Anyone else who disagrees, well, you're free to do so. Anyway, and The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is a collection of different characters, all about this from the same era. There's like different volumes to the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, where different classical literature heroes get to come together. But yeah, it's a mishmash of everyone you can think of, from Jackal and Mr. Hyde to the Frankenstein's monster. God,
Mina
the
Harker.
Lena Harker, yeah,
Basically,
and
Mina
many
Harker
others.
from Dracula. Yeah.
basically a giant crossover.
Van Helsing, I think, is
Yeah.
in one of them.
Oh, that's
Anyway,
And
amazing.
the captain of the Nautilus from 20,000
yeah.
Leagues
I
Under
remember.
Sea.
yeah, Captain Nemo. Yeah, that's right. Anyway, it's
Captain
an
Nemo, right.
entertaining. Yeah, it's an entertaining thing, and something similar to that was a literature, a literature work by some French novelist. I'll look it up later and educate myself. But yeah, as far as the genre in which Solomon Kane is, I think horror has borrowed a lot of things from a lot of places, but Solomon Kane is probably one of those protagonists that you very rarely see in works of fiction. That is a confident man or individual, doesn't have to be a man, who's not afraid of what's the horror in the story, right? Because it's really hard to write a horror story with a protagonist that's like, I'm going to take my hands and I'm gonna, snuffle this, strangle this ghost to death, So
Is that true though? Not exactly in the same way as Solomon Kane strangles a ghost, but I thought The Exorcist was pretty solid
The who?
portrayal. The Exorcist, the three movies. You have the priest who confronts the evil, and he does so because of his faith, even though he's
Oh, The Exorcist.
Yes.
Sorry, my bad. Yeah.
yeah. I thought that was a beautiful portrayal of. I think that's a very beautiful portrayal of a man who is driven to right to wrong, even though he is. He would much rather wet his pants, basically.
I mean, Solomon Kane is basically that character.
Yeah.
From The
Well,
Exorcist.
less chest hair probably.
And I didn't say that it wasn't impossible. I was saying that it's just not something that usually is done within the horror genre. When it comes to, I think, directly things that are very much linked to Solomon Kane, you have to look at something like Evil Dead. I think Evil Dead has a protagonist that's basically Solomon Kane, especially in the Army of Darkness. It's this badass who still has these moments of doubt, but he's gonna get it. He's gonna get there in the end. The story that was written before this, Red Shadows, is one of the first globe-trotting adventures that I've ever read, and I think that were ever done in a short story format. Because Solomon Kane goes from France to another country to then Africa, like the continent, on this chase of a man who killed an innocent girl. And it's a really entertaining. So maybe we could do that one next. I don't want to spoil too much as to what happens.
But I actually haven't heard from Rob how you feel about Solomon Kane as a character.
Yeah, I think he's really good, really well drawn. I think actually that Conan is not inferior to Solomon Kane. He's just different. They're both well drawn characters, and they both have more to them than immediately meets the eye. I think Kane is has another challenge for the author, in that he's not free to invent the background as he is with Conan, because Kane moves in a historical context, so he has to relate it. But fortunately, Howard is an absolute wizard at historical fiction. I would strongly, in fact, recommend that one day we do some of his Oriental tales fiction, especially The Shadow of the Thunder. Sorry, The Sowers of the Thunder.
Wait. Oriental stories? What do you mean?
There's a magazine called Oriental Stories, and he
publishes in that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think four times, and they're all first rate.
Cute.
And what's the character? What's the character that those stories are feature? I forget the name.
They're all different characters in the Oriental Tales ones. The one I'm thinking of is an Irishman who ends up fighting Mongols. You can't get more globe-trotting than that, really.
That's true. Tales of the Shadowmen is the name of that anthology series with all those fictional characters.
The Mongolians were pretty globe-trotting in their day.
Yes. But they didn't get as far as Ireland.
That's true. That's I guess that's a little bit a strike against them. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, but anyway, yeah. Tell me a little bit more about the Irishman that you're talking about. What kind of a story is it? I'm sure we'll cover it one day. I'm sure we'll cover it one day. But
he's in exile from Ireland because his attempt to win the throne of High King against the English was betrayed by a woman, and what he doesn't know is that the woman was sorry and is following him, and they meet up just at the end in a climacteric battle where Sultan Baybars defeats the Mongols, I think. I can't remember the details, but it's a memorable story, partly because this Irishman thinks that he's the enemy of the Arabs, but in fact he has to ally with the Arabs against the Mongols, and he actually befriends one of the sheiks in so doing. And it's quite a my enemy's enemy is my
enemy
of my enemy.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah, we got it.
All right. So there is another character that I really want to talk about when it comes to Robert E. Howard, and maybe we can do a story of him. And that is the character that helped Howard to contribute to the Cthulhu mythos, to the Lovecraftian lore. Professor Caravan. He's like featured in The Children of the Night. And I'm blanking on all the rest, but I think that's the first one. That's the most important one. He's a really interesting guy. He has all this like backstory that's kind of given to you in these little droplets that you kind of have to connect together. And he's another one of those people that, although is kind of frightened by what he's seeing and what he's understanding, he just can't get enough. And that's the trait that I really like in Solomon Kane as well. Solomon Kane is introduced to us like, why shouldn't I go there? Because it's dangerous, right? But the other place was dangerous. Yeah, but this is like even more dangerous because it's like something unholy, and he's like, unholy, dangerous. Step aside, child. You know, like it's like, let's go, let's do this, and that's the type of characters I like. That's the person I want to be. You know, just look straight at danger and say, you know, show me the best you've got. Great stuff.
Yeah. Again, I mean, it's that wish fulfillment, power fantasy, you know,
Defo.
kind of like, that people want to be like, you know. So that's what Howard was all about. It's like the brave protagonist that would go out and face things that no one else would. So yeah, that's
Right. Well, we're almost at an hour. So let's go around the table and give our ratings to the story, as per usual. Yeah. Let's start with you, Robert. Yeah.
Yeah. There we go.
Well, I'm going
10
to
upon 10, 11 upon 10, 12 upon 10.
I'm going to annoy everybody by giving it a 10 because I really don't see how it could be improved, despite what you have said.
he's a fan.
Yeah.
He's a fan.
Cool. All right. I'm gonna give it a 7.5 out of 10. Yeah. It really like I said, I am cautiously liking Solomon Kane as a character very much. Cautiously. I hope he doesn't become a cardboard. Well, cardboard is not the right word to describe it. I hope it doesn't become a theme. Like Conan became a theme for me. Yeah. So pending what the rest of the stories turn out to be like, for now it's 7.5. And Anthony,
I'll give it an 8. I think the character is just, and I've read a few of the stories in the past, but I think the character just reading the story again kind of really brought back the character's complexity, and he's a breath of fresh air from Conan, and just my experience with the character and role playing with it. And the world he inhabits, I think it's an 8 for me in terms of just, I think the story could have been improved here and there, but again, is that just hindsight from an 80-year-old plus story? Looking back on it, I think product of its time, but overall, I think an 8's the score I'm going to go with.
and Mickey,
Final word.
100 out of 10.
So just imagine, right? So it's like in the HBO TV show and the acclaimed series of A Song of Ice and Fire. Everyone's sitting around at the dinner table, and in this instance, XJ is dressed like Catelyn Stark, and he sort of, he goes to Roose Bolton, he opens it up, and he sees that like instead of the chainmail, it says like 10 out of 10 on it, and I'm just looking at him like, I'm sorry, like you're about to die, and the Reigns of Castamere begin to play. That's exactly it. I've got 10 out of 10 here. Fantastical story. I mean, probably the pinnacle of writing. A tale that is done in less than 3 acts, and yet still makes a lot of sense, and has a gripping tale, and introduces a concept, a character, a setting, all in one, has a satisfying ending, and doesn't linger too long. It is the perfect work of fiction. And those of you who have given it less than 10, I challenge you to write something better.
As an enjoyer, as a reader and an enjoyer of short stories in this particular context, I don't feel the need to do that. There you go. An audience.
I mean, it was a joke challenge.
An audience naturally sits above the author.
Naturally.
My man says this to a group of writers. Like this is like looking at the lions and shouting
why wouldn't that be the case? A story would be, it's like the saying, man, if a tree falls in the forest but no one hears it, has the tree really fallen? We all need readers more than we need writers. Let's put it that way.
just because something is true doesn't mean you say it in a particular situation. You know, you could be sitting around, you know, and there's a bunch of French people, and you just, you know, you look around and you just say like, "Oh, I really hate, you know, French baking. Like it just sucks. You know, I don't get it. You know, maybe this is not the situation you say the truth in."
Depends on how what kind of smile you have on your face when you say that.
Yeah, yes. As
Right.
the Virginian says, smile when you say that to me.
Very good. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
Solomon Kane. We'll probably do another story on him. I'm really looking forward to see you know, like where it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, I won't
Yeah.
give 10 out of 10 for
Definitely.
the others, though. I think this was the
No.
best one.
Oh,
Okay.
really? Okay, we gotta do one of those then. Anything to get Robert to give a 1 out of 10. That'll be amazing. Got pretty close with Dragons of Autumn Twilight.
Can't remember what I gave that one.
3, I believe.
Blimey, that much? I must have
All right.
been very
Burn. All right. Okay. Cool. And that wraps up this episode about Solomon Kane. And like and subscribe if you like our content. Please help us grow the channel and comment on. Feel free to leave a comment. Tell us anything you want about Solomon Kane. And do you agree or disagree with us? Are you like me? Conan is less of a character compared to Kane, or you think they are on par? Things like that. All right, man. Everybody, take care and have a nice day.
Bye bye.